Guys, are you ready for math this week? This week and next week we are going to be finishing up Chapter 8. We've already done Lessons 1, 2, a check my progress. Next we're going to do Lesson 4. We're going to actually skip Lesson 3, which is just a review lesson, but we're going to jump on to Lesson 4, finish up a couple lessons this week and another check my progress. Next week we'll do the last couple lessons and our review study guide, and then a chapter test on Canvas. All right? Before you continue watching this video, I want you to go back and review lessons 1 and 2, even the check my progress. If you didn't do the reteach worksheet that I assigned on Friday, go back and do that. And I want you to review all the videos I posted for those 2 lessons because we are jumping into lesson 4. So instead of doing lesson 3, I just want you to review those. Then we'll do lesson 4. But I want to make sure you really understand lessons 1 and 2 before we keep going, all right? So go back and review those, and then come back and finish this video where we jump into lesson 4. We're going to wrap up this chapter in the next 2 weeks. I know you're going to do a great job, all right? Keep watching, and we'll move on to lesson 4.
Equivalent fractions. Megan has 8 fish in an aquarium. 4 fish are green. So Megan says that 4/8 of the fish are green. Megan could use another fraction to represent 4/8. Use a whole fraction model as a guide. First, show 1/2. Now show 2/4. Next, show 4/8. The fraction models show that 4/8 is the same as 1/2. Fractions that represent the same amount are equivalent fractions. We can also use multiplication or division to find equivalent fractions. First, let's use multiplication. Multiply the numerator and the denominator by the same number, 2. 4 times 2 equals 8. 8 times 2 equals 16. Now let's use division to find 2 more equivalent fractions. Divide the numerator and the denominator by the same number, 2. Since 2/4 is not in its simplest form, we can divide again to find another equivalent fraction. Divide the numerator and the denominator by the same number, 2. So, 8/16, 2/4, and 1/2 are equivalent to 4/8.
All right, we are jumping into lesson 4. We're going to read the essential question right here. How can different fractions name the same amount? If you just watched the video of the video right before this, then you got an introduction to equivalent fractions. What we are going to do now is we are going to apply it and practice it so we get really good at creating equivalent fractions and identifying them. Read right here with me. You have used models and number lines to find equivalent fractions. Multiplication can also be used to find equivalent fractions. Fractions that have the same numerator and denominator are equivalent to one whole. All right, let's review numerator and denominator. If this is my fraction, my numerator is my number on top, and my denominator is my number on the bottom. My numerator tells me how many pieces I have, and my denominator tells me how many pieces there are total. Let's jump to math in my world. Make sure you have your math packet in front of you and you are doing these with me just like we would if we were together in class. Example 1. A recipe for spaghetti and meatballs calls for 3/4 pound of ground beef. Find 2 fractions that are equivalent to 3/4. One way, use models. Model 3/4. So if you look over here, they drew a bar. Here's our 3/4 one. They divided it into pieces and they made 1/4 3 times, which is equal to 3/4. Place 6 1/8 tiles below the 1/4 tiles. So that's what they did here. Place 9 1/12 tiles below the 1/8 tiles. So that's what they did here. The 1/8 tiles are smaller than the 1/4 tiles, so there are more of them. The 1/12 tiles are smaller than the 1/4 tiles, and the 1/8 tiles, so there are more of them. All right, so how many 1/12 tiles are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 9 out of 12. For the 8, for 1/8, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. So 6/8 and 3/4. These are all the same. They are all equivalent fractions. Another way is to use multiplication. So you can multiply. 3/4 is equal to 3/4 times 2 over 2, which is equal to 1 whole. When you multiply 3 times 2, you get 6. When you multiply 4 times 2, you get 8. So 6/8 is equal to 3/4. Here's another example, and they multiplied by 3. 3/4 is equal to 3/4 times 3/3, which is equal to 9/12. So the two fractions that are equivalent to 3/4 are 6/8 and 9/12. Okay, there wasn't any work to do on that. It was just us talking about it. So let's jump to the next page, and there's some work to do. Read up here at the top. Let me turn my pen on. You can use multiplication to write a fraction with a denominator of 10 as an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100. If you think about factors and multiples, you know that 10 is a factor of 100, or 100 is a multiple of 10. If I skip count by 10, I will say 100. Or I could divide 100 by 10 evenly. So if there's a fraction that is a tenth, we can always turn it into a 100th fraction. Example 2. Leanna has a container of dry beans. The table shows the fraction of each type of bean. Which type of bean shows a fraction that is equivalent to 3/10 of the container? Each fraction in the table has a denominator of 100. Use multiplication to find which fraction is equivalent to 3/10. So multiply, we know that 10 is a factor of 100, so we're going to try and get to 100. I know that 10 times 10 equals 100, so I'm going to multiply my numerator and my denominator by 10. So 3/10 is equal to 3/10 times 10/10, or 3 times 10 over 10 times 10. 3 times 10, I know my zeros trick. I can cover my 0, and I can just multiply 3 times 1, which is 3, and put my 0 back on, so 30. And then I can do my zeros trick on the bottom. 10, I can actually cover both zeros. 1 times 1 is 1, and I had to cover 2 zeros, so I need to put 2 zeros back. So 3/10 is equivalent or equal to 30/100. So 3/10 of the container has 30 beans. 30 beans. So Lima. Guided practice. Make sure you are doing these with me. Those other ones you were just watching and listening. Now we're going to jump in and do some work together. Write the fraction for the part that is shaded, then find an equivalent fraction. So there are two things that we need to do. The first thing we need to do is we need to write the fraction that is shaded. Remember, our numerator is the number of pieces that are colored in or that we have. Our denominator is how many pieces there are total. So, how many pieces are colored in? 2. And how many pieces are there total? 4. Now, I need to write an equivalent fraction, and I'm going to multiply to do that. So I need to think about what I could multiply by, and I'm going to jump over to my notes so I can work in here. All right, it's a little easier to see. So I had 2/4 is my fraction. I'm going to multiply by 2 because I know that 2 is a factor of 2 and 4. So I'm going to multiply by 2 over 2. Well, 2 times 2 is 4, and 4 times 2 is 8. So an equivalent fraction to 2/4 would be 4/8. Why is it looking funny? Oh, well, that's okay. 4/8. These are the same. Okay, number 2. First, I need to write it as my fraction. So I need to write it as my numerator over my denominator. How many pieces are there colored in? 1. And how many pieces are there total? 3. Sorry, I'm not writing on the lines. It's a little hard with my pen. Now I'm going to jump back over to my notes, and I have 1/3, and I'm going to multiply it by 3. You can really multiply it by any number right now, but I'm just going to choose 3 because 3 is my denominator in my first fraction. 1 times 3 is 3. 3 times 3 is 9. So an equivalent fraction to 1/3 is 3/9. And that's it. You just got to pick a number to multiply and multiply the top and bottom by that number, and you have an equivalent fraction. Jump to the next page, our independent practice. So what I want you to do now is pause the video, work on the independent practice, and come back, and I will go through the answers. All right, I figured out why the screen was small, but I fixed it so you could see it again. All right, I'm going to turn my pen on. Let's write in green. That'll be fun. All right, so you should have done the independent practice already. I'm just going to go over it really quick and then check your work with it, and then you will do the homework independently. And tomorrow I will post the answers to last night's homework or today's homework, but it'll be tomorrow on Canvas. All right, so independent practice. Write the fraction for the part that is shaded, then find an equivalent fraction. So that's exactly what we just did for the guided practice. So first I need to write the fraction for the part that is shaded. The part that is shaded is my numerator. So for number 3, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces shaded, and there are 6 pieces total, which is my denominator. Now I need to figure out an equivalent fraction. So I'm going to multiply. I can multiply by any number as long as it's not 1, because 1 would just get us the same fraction. So let's jump to my notes. I'm going to erase these. You don't want to multiply by 1 because any number times 1 is itself. Okay, that identity property of multiplication is still the same. So we had 5/6, and I'm going to multiply it by 2. So I need a 2 on top and a 2 on bottom. 5 times 2 is 10. 6 times 2 is 12. So an equivalent fraction is 10/12. Oh no, my page is gone. Let's refresh. There we go. Turn my pen back on. So when I multiply it by 2, I get 10/12, or 10/12. All right, you could pick any number to multiply. I just decided to go with 2. If you multiplied by a different number, you might have a different answer, and that's all right. All right, so we need to first figure out the fraction for number 4. Let's figure out how many pieces are colored in. 3, so that's my numerator on top. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces total, which is my denominator. Now we need to find an equivalent fraction, so I just need to multiply. Let's multiply by 3 this time. 3 times 3 is 9. 5 times 3 is 15. 9/15. It's kind of a hard one to say, 15ths. Again, if you multiplied by different numbers, that's okay. Your answer might be different. Number 5, how many pieces are colored in for our numerator? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And how many pieces are there total for our denominator? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Great job. Now let's multiply. Let's multiply by 2 again because it's easy and I like it. 5 times 2 is 10. 8 times 2 is 16. So 5/8 is equivalent to 10/16. Number 6, there's 1 piece colored in, and there are 5 pieces total. I'm going to multiply by 5 because 5 is my denominator. And I know my 5s really well, so I'm able to do this quick. 1 times 5, any number times 1, identity property of multiplication. It's the same number. It is 5. And 5 times 5 is 25. So 1/5 and 5/25, equivalent fractions, same thing. For the next ones, I need to circle the two fractions that are equivalent in each set of fractions. All right, so I need to figure out which fractions are equivalent. Well, I can do this a couple different ways. I can do trial and error. I can keep doing a bunch of multiplication, try and figure it out. Or I can figure out if the denominator is a multiple of a factor of each number. So for number 7, I'm going to look at 1/4. I know that if I multiply 4, I'm never going to get 6. So 1/4 and 2/6 cannot be equivalent. I know if I multiply 4 by 2, it's 8. If I multiply it by 3, it's 12. So 1/4 times 3/3 is equal to 3/12. So these two are equivalent. If I multiply 4, I will never get 6. So that cannot be an equivalent fraction. All right, 2/10. Well, if I multiply by 1 to get 2 here, then I would have 2/10, which is the same. So it can't be this one. So it has to be 2/10 and 21/100. I added a 0 to make 10 into 100, so I have to add a 0 when I multiply my 2 to make it 20. Okay, this is where knowing our factors and multiples and our times tables really, really helps us, because you can just look at these and figure out which ones work and which ones don't. For number 9, 3/5. 3/5, if I skip count by 5, will I ever say 8, 5, 10, 15? No, I skip right over it. So since 8 is not a multiple of 5, I cannot multiply any number to get an equivalent fraction that ends in 8. So it has to be 3/5 and 6/10. And just to check it, just to make sure I'm right, I'm going to do a multiplication problem to check it. Okay, so I have 3/5 and I need to get it to say 6/10. Well, I know that to get 6, I have to multiply 3 by 2. 3 times 2 is 6. Oh, it's not going to let me write. I'll write it down here. And 5 times 2 is 10. So they are equivalent. That's just me checking my work. 1/100th, 10/100ths, or 1/10. Which one of those are equivalent? Okay. Can I ever have a 1 and a 1 on the same and it be equivalent? No, because anytime I multiply tens, I add a 0. So it cannot be this one. It has to be these two. I added a 1 when I multiplied by 10 to get 10, and I added a 0, and I added a 0 when I multiplied 10 by 10 to get 100. Now here's where it gets tricky for number 11. 3, 6, and 12 are all multiples of 3, so I can't look at my denominator. When I count by 3s, I will say 6 and I will say 12. 3, 6, what comes next? 9, good job, and then 12. So finding my multiples in my denominator is not going to help me. I need to look at my numerator. All right, if I skip count by 2, will I say 5? No, so that cannot be it. Will I say 8? Yeah, 2/3 times what equals 8/12. Well, what's 8 divided by 2? Think about a multiplication problem backwards, like division. That's how we solve division. We think about it as a backwards, or that's how we solve multiplications with unknowns. We think about it as a division problem. So 8 divided by 2 is 4, and I have to multiply 4 on the top and bottom. 12, 6/10, 40/100ths, or 4/10. Well, all my numbers on my denominator work, all right? If I skip count by 6, will I ever say 40 or 4? No, the only ones that have similar factors and multiples are 40/100ths and 4/10. So those have to be my equivalent fractions. All right, algebra, find each unknown. So we need to figure out what is the unknown for each equivalent fraction. 1/4 is equal to what over 8? I have to think about how we got from 4 to 8, and I know I'm multiplying. So if I skip count by 4, how many times do I have to skip count until I get 8? 4, 8, just 2. So I know I'm multiplying by 2. Now I can take the 1 on top and multiply it by 2 to get my unknown. 1 times 2, identity property of multiplication, Any number times 1 is that same number, so it is 2. 2/8. Same thing with 14. What number did I have to multiply 10 by to get 100? 10. So now I can just multiply my 7 times 10 to find my unknown. Now on the top, it's flipped, but it's the same thing. What did I have to multiply my 3 by to get 6? I had to multiply it by 2. 3, 6. I skip counted twice. So now I just need to multiply 5 times 2 and get 10 and find my unknown. All right, check your answers with this. I hope you did a great job. If not, I will be on Zoom on Friday and can help you. You can always contact me through Classroom Dojo, my email, or my Google Voice number. All of those are posted on the homepage for Canvas. What I want you to do now is go do the homework for this. Watch the videos if you need help reviewing or practicing. I'll post the answer key to the homework tomorrow. Okay, because I don't want you to see it today. I want you to do the homework. And then tomorrow we will jump into lesson 5. So I will see you back here for more math tomorrow.